we don't want to have God complexes. I'm
Yeah, that's
not
the
saying
thing.
we should be,
The word God is a bit
prideful,
of
and
a has a bit of a baggage because
it
usually people
does.
have some God complex type thing, especially in leadership, and
Yeah,
that's universally probably a
that's
negative thing. What would
it's
be
usually
other
seen.
word
Yeah,
like? Because usually like whereas like even like other names you could use that denote godhood, like creator, or maybe something like that's not like I
okay.
think I'm the greatest connotation, but
Yeah,
I have
it's
like I'm constructively applying great skill and power to improve
yeah,
things.
it's never about like being prideful and thinking you're God, but it is always about striving to be like God. In almost any Christian faith, we all try to be like Jesus. There's so many songs. I'm trying to be like
Yeah,
Jesus.
what would Jesus do?
Out there. What would Jesus do? Exactly. So that's really the sole purpose of almost all religion is to try to make ourselves better, to
In
try to
which
make ourselves
case,
more
I
like
think like
Jesus.
that's something that even like skeptics generally don't have an issue with, although of course they see Jesus as like a great guy, but
Yeah.
still like aspiring to be a great person. Isn't There's nothing problematic with that.
Yeah. It's fine to be as good as possible, as perfect as possible, as great as possible. And if God is the ultimate greatness and Jesus is the ultimate perfection from our perspective, whether or not it's true or not, or whether or not you believe in him or not, it's a perspective of what is perfection. What are we striving for? And I think that's a pretty good target for all of us to at least try to emulate is our image of the perfect leader, our image of the perfect creator.
Well,
So I
I
think
just like the issues that I have generally. It's a lot of like word issues, like word connotation issues. Because of course, if you say like leader in English, it sounds great.
yeah.
Do you know how you say leader in German?
No.
Führer.
Oh, really? I
That's
didn't
the
know that.
thing.
There you go.
It's
That's definitely
really
an interesting.
just the same word. It's just like
I
they
didn't know
used it
that.
a bit differently in a different
Yeah,
language.
I
So
hear
it's
you.
just in English
Okay,
sometimes like the potential issues with like terms are not that
I'm sure.
obvious unless you do a bit of a
All right.
language analysis. Even like because like for instance in United States of America they're using terms like homeland security, which is it's like almost like very close to like Vaterland. It's like whatever like they had like exactly like the
Sure.
terminology that Nazis used. Like I'm just like waiting for them to start using like the English variant of Lebensraum as something like the like reasons for like military
Okay.
expansion type stuff. So it's just like words are potentially problematic or dangerous. And like when you
Yeah.
say the like what you said, like I completely can see people just misreading whatever because I think I understand what you meant, and just because you were using words like leader or God, like
Well,
completely misreading like what you meant by that. So I would just like to clarify that like it's in philosophy, everything that's like worth anything in philosophy is definition exercise. So what you want
absolutely.
to do is to not just use a term, but like as well as you can, explain what it is exactly that you mean when you say that, which then
Okay.
becomes actually like people actually start understanding what you were saying.
Well, let's expand on that a bit because there's another word that I used with a conversation with my friend this week when we were talking about leadership and those laws of power. It's the word savior.
Yeah,
Because in many ways, a leader and a savior is really trying to do very similar things. A leader is trying to save people that are save his followers, and whatever his version of saving means, that's really all a leader's trying to do. But savior, of course, has so many other connotations to it that again gives you kind of God complexes and kind of makes you think you're as good as Christ or as good as God
or
because I'm a savior.
I think the implication that skeptics would hate about that, or secular thinkers, secular humanists, is that savior implies that people need to be saved, that they're somehow fallen, and the whole mythology of like the Christian, especially Catholic
Exactly.
doctrine of
Yeah.
people, and which is something that like is really annoying or slash offensive to many
Yes.
skeptical humanists who like in general would probably very much agree with whatever policies you would support.
Yep.
But this kind of language might because I don't like to be I generally don't like to be like sort of like a word police type stuff
Yeah.
or try to like then devolve into some sort of like corporate safe euphemisms because that's also not great. It's just that
Yes.
like if you want to use the word or the concept which is inspired from something maybe like a religious philosophy like that's fine, that's fair. It's just like then it's good to continue explaining like when you say savior, what do you mean? You probably don't mean that people are terrible fallen creatures who are weak and
Exactly.
unable, and then have to can only pray to some higher power to. That's probably
No.
not the implication. I assume what you were saying.
Absolutely not. Exactly. And I think that's definitely something that can be a very important part of what we're trying to do here is broaden the language of what it means to save the world. because that's when I think of savior, it could be anything. Anyone that's trying to save somebody else or save the world. Even we're saviors of the world, and I'd like to think of all of us in some small way, anyone who's trying to save the world, as a savior of the world. um, but you're right, it's really important to not get offended by language, or not read too much into language, beyond what's the purpose or the intent might be. And that's a very tricky thing to do in today's world. Like, just like the same problems we had with the fake news, this extends to the fake news of what a leader is and what a savior is, and what we're trying to become, what our goals as humans, as humanists, should be.
Yeah, because I can already see like what some of the like fake news people would do with like what you just said, like just like cutting the clip, just like
Yeah.
include the few problematic words. If you just cut those words together and then
Yes.
pretend
Yeah.
like to be outraged that you just talked about that and nothing else.
Yes.
So that's like there's even an art if you want to like speak publicly in trying to be aware of like how your speech can be cut to clips and stuff, and try to not say like things that they could be completely cut out of context in like a 5-second clip and sound like you
Yeah.
are meaning something completely different. It's sort of like a defense. This is like a communication defense. But yeah, because
Very
that's
interesting.
just what I'm trying to say is like of course, it's not our intention to be like super religious or spiritual necessarily about this, and it's not that like it's in any way opposed to skeptics, even or skepticism, especially as
Yeah.
idea. It's just that I would always like to make it clear when we say something that might start sounding like it's something to just then say no, that what we actually meant is, so that even if somebody like makes the clip out of context, somebody else could then play the continuation for the next minute explaining, no, that's not what we meant. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
a part of like on the record, make it clear
Yeah, for
what it is
sure.
that you actually
I
mean.
think, yeah, it's almost impossible to avoid that if you're having any kind of deep conversation about anything. You're always going to have some of that, and that's part of the challenge. We just have to be aware of that, and do our best to, again, make ourselves as thick-skinned as possible, and make any of our readers or any of our followers just very thick-skinned, non-offended type people that are going to actually be listening to us for the right reasons, and be
Yeah.
kind of pushing forward with the goals of saving the earth,
Yeah,
however we
yeah. It's
define it, or
just
however we.
it's like another word again, follower. Which is like
Yeah.
shortly
Yeah.
after we were talking about like gods and saviors and stuff, then like if it's so
Yeah.
close to each other, the word follower starts to sound like you mean the other meaning,
Yes,
than
it
the
does.
like completely new rebranded version of what that means. So by
Yeah.
followers,
So
we definitely mean like people who subscribe to
people
the
subscribe.
channel
Yeah.
and just watch the videos and stuff. It's not like
Yeah. You're
literal
right.
followers from the days of old.
Yeah. So my only point is, with all this discussion, and again, anyone who hears this later, or hears us talking and wants to make fun of us for it, I just want to be free. I want anyone anywhere to be free to talk, use whatever words that they feel fit in the moment, and not feel like they're always dancing around words or dancing around the issues. We have to do our best to be clear, and be, as you know well spoken as possible. But at the same time, it's fun to just be able to say whatever we want, and for allowing others to say whatever we want without worrying about giving offense or taking
Yeah, yeah.
offense. So I think that's definitely something we can all strive to be better at.
Yeah, it's definitely not something like not about censoring yourself. It's just that
Mhm.
just general awareness of like, okay, now I said this,
Awareness.
people will probably understand it this way, so let me be more clear and
Okay.
explain myself better. Because like the constructive pressure that this is like the philosophical pressure of like, okay, I should define this better. It's not
Yes.
that like I should not be talking about it at all, or have like words that I will never say.
Okay. So let's just jump back to it then. So just to summarize everything we've kind of just said here, I like to think of the leader as all these things we said, kind of all rolled into one, with the focus again on saving the world, on making the world better for as many people as possible, freer, uh, better able to live longer, happier, more fulfilled lives, full of harmony and progression.
And from
It's a
my point,
mouthful, but
And from my point
yeah.
of view, that a leader should be someone who became a leader on the basis of their excellence.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's just kind of dig into that a little bit. So how do we um, how do we encourage leaders for that purpose, and how do we encourage ourselves and anyone that we come in contact with to aspire to that? How do we make that an attractive type of leader? And how do we, I guess, not so much convince people, but how do we portray that type of leadership as desirable?
Well, that's sounded very like sort of a corporate rewording. It's I
Yeah.
think the word that we like in my company we have arrived at, because sort of policing language is kind of my job there. Is
Mm,
inspire. Like the least problematic word that you could use is how to inspire people, because you really had that sort of discussions like what about persuade, or what about influence? It's like the many different like convince. It's like those are the words that you
okay.
want, and the other
Inspire.
ones do have more problematic implications, especially because if you don't mean it in the like let's do something to make them, because that's sort of the
Okay.
forcing them just through argument. You can still be forcing someone if you know you're very good at arguments.
Right.
So inspiration is what you really probably should want you to use, because even that's probably what you mean the most, is that
Yeah.
you're not forcing anybody, not even through clever argument, like to try to create a situation in which they definitely will end up convinced. It's that inspiration is something like, yeah, if they internally find that worthwhile, then just because of being inspired, they will do something they did want to do. They will just do the final
Okay.
step to actually start doing the thing.